Good afternoon and welcome to the EIM Governing Body General Session. Please note that all audience audio...
Only the main conference is recorded.
Please note that all audience audio connections will be muted until the comment portion of the call. With that, I'll turn the call over to Chair Anita Decker. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mark. So good afternoon and welcome to the December 15th General Session of the Western Energy Imbalance Market. Let's see, we need to establish that we have a quorum, so can we have the roll call?
Yes, thank you, Chair Decker. We'll start with you, Chair Decker.
Present.
Vice Chair Konzioka.
Present.
Member Fong.
Here.
Member Gardner.
Present.
And Member Prescott.
Here.
Excellent. All are accounted for, and we do have a quorum to proceed. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. So a couple things before we get started. This is a busy time of the year for people both professionally and personally as we move through the holidays. While virtual meetings this year have sometimes been challenging, they also have provided a level of safety and people not having to travel. So I know a lot of people are starting their travel. They may not have been driving for a bit, and we've got a lot of inclement weather throughout the West. So I would just hope people will be safe and thinking about their driving and enjoying some time with family and friends. With that, to get started, I want to ask, is there any public comment for anything that's not related to the agenda today? So do we have any public comment not on the agenda?
And please feel free to place yourself in the comment queue by utilizing the raise hand feature located at the bottom of your screen. If you are on a mobile device, tap your screen to display the toolbar, then press raise hand. You will be unmuted when it is your turn. Please accept the unmute message to become unmuted. If you are on the phone, please press pound 2 to enter the queue. And we're currently awaiting any comments. It looks as though we have no comments at this time.
Right, thank you, Mark. So second item on the agenda is the approval of our meeting minutes. I'm going to turn this back to Roger.
Thank you, Chair Decker. Have a motion to approve the October 20th, 2021 General Session minutes of the Western EIM Governing Body meeting.
So moved. This is Val.
Thank you, Val.
Second. This is Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I will go ahead and, as we do in these virtual meetings, I will take the vote individually here. And so, Chair Decker, your vote, please.
Aye.
Vice Chair Konzioka.
Aye.
Member Fong.
Yes.
Member Gardner.
Yes.
And Member Prescott.
Aye.
Thank you, Governing Body. The motion passes.
So the next agenda item is our CEO report by Elliot Mainzer. So Elliot.
Thank you, Chair Decker. Members of the Governing Body, it's nice to see all of you, and I appreciate the safety moment. It is wise of all of us to try to really watch out. It has been definitely some inclement weather, but definitely welcoming the snowpack for certain. So thank you for that. And with this CEO report, I decided to try to take a little bit of a look back on 2021 and a little bit of a look forward to what I think is going to be a really dynamic year in 2022. There's quite a bit. It's hard to believe we're sitting here at the end of this year. You know, I think when we start out looking back on this year with reliable operations and resource adequacy, as I said, I think we all sort of pivot back to July 9th, which really was the crux of the summer with the very hot temperatures in California and desert Southwest, and the Boot Lake fire really stretched our grid to the edge. But I think we were fortunate and very focused and able to ride through that very extreme event successfully. And I think there are a number of really important contributing factors. Certainly, the additional procurement of generating capacity that was brought online over the last year through the efforts of the PUC and the other regulatory authorities is very important, especially the battery storage resources performed extremely well, especially under net peak conditions. Of course, the ISO, in addition, took some specific actions related to RMR and capacity procurement mechanism. There were some extensions of the ones through pooling requirements. And I think really equally importantly was the improved communication and coordination with our California regulatory agencies and adjacent utilities. That was just absolutely essential this year. And certainly when things got really tight, access to traditional and emergency demand response, which has continued to play an important role here in California. At the end of the day, though, I really want to tip my hat as well to our folks down at the Control Center. They really did a fabulous job. We really appreciate their work, 7 by 24, keeping lights on in California. And I think July 9th certainly validated the work that's underway in partnership with the state regulatory agencies to really stay focused, to restore and maintain a healthy reserve margin, to bring additional clean capacity resources onto the system, and to leverage new technologies on both the supply side and the demand side in the years ahead. And I think all of us are just extraordinarily focused on that challenge in the years ahead. I want to turn next to coordinated transmission planning, queuing, and procurement. This is an increasingly important topic for us here at the ISO. And this last year, we worked very closely with the CEC, with the CPUC, and our industry partners to really reinvigorate long-term transmission planning and take steps to better synchronize integrated resource planning, transmission queuing, and resource procurement processes. This is really, I think, absolutely essential in order to achieve our SB 100 goals reliably and cost-effectively. And certainly, transmission planning reform is a hot topic, not only here in California, but really across the West and across the country in general with the FERC ANOPR. This February, we are going to be releasing our first 20-year transmission outlook long-term transmission plan. I'm really excited about this effort. Neil Millar and his whole team have been working very closely with the regulatory agencies. We've used SB 100 resource portfolios to characterize the long-term architecture of the ISO's high-voltage transmission system in the years ahead. And this is an opportunity to really take a deep look at onshore, offshore, and interregional transmission solutions. And I think the 20-year outlook is designed really to provide an overarching transmission planning roadmap to guide intermediate power and transmission planning, interconnection, queuing, and procurement in the years ahead. It really is about the synchronization of these processes. I think the improved coordination this year with the CEC and the CPUC has been extraordinarily valuable. There is quite a bit of fine-tuning and stakeholder engagement ahead to really get all of these pieces moving in lockstep together. But I really look forward to building on that collaboration in 2022 and to really take the long-term planning framework to the next steps. Of course, we're also administering a very active stakeholder process to take a look at fundamental reforms to transmission queuing procedures. And for the next several years, when we know we have the very important challenge of replacing the generation that's going to be coming off the line, but the OTCs, Diablo Canyon, we've posted clear and very transparent information about currently available transmission capacity to inform and guide resource procurement in the next few years. And really try to make best use of available transmission capacity that's available today while we work towards the longer-term builds. It's going to be very important. So again, 2022 is really in many ways going to be a major focus on long-term transmission planning and queuing and synchronization. So looking forward to that. Of course, this year was really in many ways 2021, I think, with the advent of the bulk storage fleet on the California grid. And, you know, we really appreciate the level of policy leadership and vision that's gone into making sure that this resource is now available to the state. And today, I think we by the end of this year, we're going to have 2,500 megawatts of 4-hour lithium-ion batteries on the California grid. And I believe that is the highest concentration of lithium-ion storage in the world, and really testament, as I said, to years of policy support and procurement efforts by state officials. And in general, the battery storage fleet, we've had a few issues along the way, but in general, I think you can say that this resource has performed exceptionally well, especially in helping us meet those net peak requirements during stressed grid conditions. And we have a lot of work here. This year, we completed the ESDR 4 initiative. We held, I thought, was a very dynamic and engaging storage forum on October 28th. Had several hundred participants in that, exploring sort of the future of our market design and the rules to really make sure that we're enabling storage. And then we've just released the straw proposal for our new energy storage enhancements initiative, and comments on that will be due in the middle of January. So this, I think, through the storage initiative and other efforts, we really are committed to taking efforts to enable energy storage technologies to play an increasingly crucial role on the California grid and to evolve our market rules to support new storage technologies in the future. Just a really exciting part of the emerging energy landscape. As I alluded to in the beginning, improved communication and collaboration is just incredibly important. I've been very fortunate, coming back down to California, first of all, to get a chance to meet just a ton of new people in the regulatory space, in the legislative space, in industry, get reacquainted with some of the folks that I knew, and of course to reinforce and further strengthen relationships with partners and stakeholders across the Western United States. And, communication coordination is going to continue to be a key element of our strategy. Earlier this year, we held the Summer Readiness Roundtable in advance of the summer, really to ensure maximum preparedness, both within California and with our partner utilities across the West. I think that was a very successful event and clearly contributed to operational coordination and reliability during the summer. I think we've taken steps to improve the messaging around flex alerts and demand response triggering. This year, we also initiated what's known as our Energy Matters blog, where we're producing a regular stream of stories about key issues that are impacting the ISO and our partners across the region, also leveraging the subject matter expertise of folks within the organization. I think that's been well received. We'll continue that. And, of course, next year, we'll also be rolling out a new redesigned website and a 5-year strategic plan for the ISO. So the important initiatives for next year. I'm really pleased to see our new Vice President of Stakeholder Engagement and Customer Experience, Joanne Serena, hit the ground running. We're really looking forward to continue to strengthen the quality of the stakeholder processes here at the ISO. It's just so important to our success. Of course, 2021 also had some very challenging issues, and I think top of the list were the issues around resource sufficiency and the wheel-throughs. And, these were divisive and polarizing issues to a certain degree that really stretched us to the limit. At the end of the day, I just want to thank all of the folks across the spectrum who were impacted by both of these issues for staying at the table, working with us, and looking for constructive solutions, because they really do require us to think differently about these issues, to really understand what resource adequacy signals are telling us today, and to think as a group of utilities and as a group of stakeholders on win-win solutions to these issues. So we've been taking some additional time to try to further work through the resource sufficiency evaluation issues. I think we're making some real progress. Those will come back to the joint session of the governing body and the Board of Governors in February for decision making. And we've also, I think, made some real progress on trying to provide some certainty over the course of the next couple of summers, in particular on the wheel-through issue, so that folks can actually conduct their planning and their procurement with some certainty around the rules in the short to medium term, while we work on a longer-term solution to that very important issue. So I've really appreciated folks working with us. Challenging, important work, and I just want to reiterate our commitment to continuing to find win-win constructive solutions to those issues. On the front of the Western Energy Imbalance Market and EDAM, this was really a remarkable year through all of these challenging issues that we've been facing. I've just been extraordinarily pleased to see the progress made on both of these fronts. Of course, the decision back on August 20th to adopt the Joint Authority Framework for EIM governance, I think, was absolutely foundational. Just a huge appreciation to Therese Hampton and all of the members of the GRC for that work. I think that really was a crucial milestone in building greater collaboration and inclusiveness and confidence in EIM governance. I think it does demonstrate the capacity and increased willingness of California parties to take meaningful steps forward on governance reform. And we're just really looking forward to tomorrow's first official joint session under this new framework. I think that's just super positive and incredibly important. Obviously, through all of the issues we've been working through across the summer, again, just amazed to watch the progress on the enhanced day-ahead market. I just so appreciated the team of people that came together, the EIM entities, the California load-serving entities, working with Mark Rockleader and our team, across the summer to come up with a set of core design principles to try to reinvigorate interest in EDAM and to try to bridge some of the earlier issues that had proven problematic. I think that team came up for air at our October 13th EDAM forum, which was attended by over 600 people from across the West, and just did a fabulous job of trying to explain the vision for the next phase of EDAM development and to start really establishing some reinvigorated interest and probably most important, some real momentum on that EDAM initiative. We followed the October 13th initiative up with a meeting on November 12th where folks had a chance to really sink their teeth and ask some really substantive questions about the design principles. And we've now established the work group structure and the work plan for EDAM development in 2022, 2023, and 2024. And I think just to reiterate, the plan, of course, is to kick off right after the new year, literally beginning on January 3rd, with 3 work groups that'll be focused on transmission, resource efficiency, forward showings, and greenhouse gas accounting. I think we've just got fabulous attendance and folks geared up to participate in those efforts. We'll spend the first quarter of the year really working to consolidate gains and try to put together with the stakeholders a straw proposal for that market, and then work across the course of 2022 to finalize the rules and bring that forward for decision making at the end of the year. And of course, the plan would then be to move into implementation, testing, preparedness in 2023, and have our first set of EDAM market participants ready to go in early 2024. I think looking forward to hearing tomorrow from Therese and the GRC on how EDAM governance may also play into that. I think hoping to hear that they will start that work as well, because I recognize how critical that is. So certainly, a lot going on. I do acknowledge, I think it's always important for us to remember that, we're working amidst a very dynamic and competitive market for market services, but we really are fully committed to positioning EDAM as the next major step in West-wide market integration, and just looking forward to the mobilization. And of course, just as we were really kicking off the EDAM initiative, it was just fabulous to see the Western energy imbalance market have such another banner year. I think the cumulative benefits now exceed $1.7 billion. This year, we have the largest annual growth in participants, including the Turlock Irrigation District and Bank Phase 2, which of course is comprised of the Modesto Irrigation District, the City of Redding, the City of Roseville, and Wampa, Sierra Nevada region. We also onboarded the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, Public Service Company of New Mexico, and Northwestern Energy. Just unbelievable lift to get all those entities on board. They all did an incredible job of preparing their people and their process and their technology. Really just seamless integrations. It was just fabulous, all done in the midst of a global pandemic. And of course, in September, 2 wonderful new additions with Wampa Desert Southwest signing an implementation agreement for 2023, and then BPA finalizing its decision to go live in 2022. And of course, just personally, I could not be more pleased or proud to have these new PMA partners in the Western EIM family. It's so critical, and they just bring so much to the table. I'm just really excited about that. So finally, just a couple of last miscellaneous things. Real highlights. I was very honored this year to have the pleasure of representing the ISO virtually at the COP26 meeting in Glasgow, discussing our very exciting new work with the Global Power Systems Transformation Consortium. That's a really exciting effort to take 6 founding system operators with very high renewable energy concentrations on their systems and to discuss evolving technology needs and operational needs and set a research agenda that we can help support and propagate across the world. We also, of course, continue to invest in improved prioritization and program management at the ISO. This year, we rolled out a new enterprise board and enterprise program management structure to really help streamline decision-making and foster improved prioritization and sequencing of our key initiatives. I know this is just important, not only internally, but I think very important to our customers who also need a sustainable and high-quality pace of market developments and initiatives. So we're very sensitive on both sides. And then finally, we rolled out our new set of cultural values and leadership behaviors, and it included funding for 26 additional FTE in our 2022 budget in key areas such as transmission planning, technology, customer service compliance, and enterprise program management. So it's hard to believe we are here at the end of 2021 and turning the page to 2022. Of course, we're all just a little bit blue. We had originally been planning to get back into the building on the 18th of January, but we have honestly still been struggling with some supply chain issues. I think the uncertainty about some of the pandemic variables, we're just not quite ready to do it yet. So we pushed back our return to the building date to the 14th of March. At that point, we'll have folks coming in on a hybrid 3-day in, 2-day remote schedule. Personally, I'm dying to meet folks. I've really had very limited pleasure to meet a lot of my employees, and I'm a little blue about that still, but we'll be a little bit more patient and just looking forward to seeing folks and just a fabulous, super productive year. And I just wanted to thank all of you on the EIM governing body for your support, for your engagement. You've all been extremely helpful, and just looking forward to working with all of you and all of our stakeholders across the Western United States here in 2022. So thanks again.
Hi, Elliot. Thank you so much. Okay, our next item is the Body of State Regulators. So we have Utah Commissioner Chair and Body of State Regulators Chair, Commissioner Thad LeVar. So, Commissioner?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Decker and members of the EIM governing body. I appreciate the opportunity to provide this update from the Body of State Regulators to the Western EIM governing body. As you said, my name is Thad LeVar. I serve as the chair of the Utah Public Service Commission, and I was recently elected as chair of the EIM BOSSR. The last update to the governing body was on October 20th by Commissioner Haley Williamson, the current BOSSR vice chair. The first issue I'll address is the recent BOSSR leadership transition. In October, Commissioner Williamson updated you on the BOSSR leadership changes, where I am serving as chair and she is serving both as vice chair and as the BOSSR representative on the governing body nominating committee. Additionally, since that meeting, Oregon Commissioner Letha Tawney has agreed to represent the BOSSR on the governance review committee. And I just want to join the comments Commissioner Williamson made to you in October by thanking Commissioner Tawney for all the leadership she provided to the BOSSR, and also thanking Idaho Commissioner Christine Raper for all of her work with the Governance Review Committee. They both led successful initiatives, including negotiation of a pathway for consistent and ongoing BOSSR staff funding and contributing BOSSR's perspectives on the joint authority model. I also want to thank Elaine Ganocchio, who formerly worked at WEED, for all the assistance she previously provided in the past to BOSSR. Worry Lee is now serving in that role for WEED to provide staff support to the Body of State Regulators. Now, moving on to BOSSR membership generally, it has been previously reported to you that Leah Fisher, a senior policy analyst at Public Generating Pool, and Tony Braun, who represents the California municipal utilities, are serving as liaisons to the BOSSR from the consumer-owned utility sector. They have participated in the last few BOSSR meetings, and we have also had meetings between them, BOSSR leadership, and BOSSR staff to ensure that their input and participation can occur on a level equivalent to BOSSR regulator members. I am optimistic that the perspectives of ratepayers from consumer-owned utilities will result in more robust discussions and evaluations of issues at the BOSSR. We do not yet have a liaison to the BOSSR from federal power marketing administrations, but we look forward to that addition in the near future. We are ready to begin a new calendar year with an approved budget for 2022 that received input and support from the state-regulated market participants. This was the first annual budget approval process under the ongoing BOSSR staff funding model. WEED staff prepared and presented the budget, and it was approved by the Body of State Regulators. The budget includes ongoing training and technical expertise so the BOSSR can fulfill the roles from its charter, both to inform utility regulators about EIM operation and to provide advice on market design and policy. Resource sufficiency is a foundational principle of the EIM, and the BOSSR continues to be engaged on the EIM Resource Sufficiency Evaluation Initiative. BOSSR members have received briefings and have discussed in multiple meetings the proposed changes within the initiative. We are now considering draft comments to provide on this issue. At our most recent meeting last week, we discussed a preliminary draft and the feedback received from members so far. We will continue to watch the EIM's calendar for addressing this initiative and await the release of the final proposal. After we consider whether that final proposal warrants any changes to our comments, we appear poised to provide consensus comments from all BOSSR members next month. We appreciate the careful attention that has been given to this crucial initiative. Electricity market expansion and coordination are high priorities to utility regulators and generally and to BOSSR members. These issues impact the Western interconnections economy, as well as electricity reliability and affordability for all customers. Many members of the BOSSR are excited about the developing stakeholder process to explore extending the EIM into day-ahead market operation. As you know, this is a fast-moving and evolving process with real benefits and real challenges. During 2022, I anticipate this issue will be prominent in each and every BOSSR agenda. At this point, it is not yet clear when the timing will be right for us to play a formal role, like submitting comments on any specific proposal. When that time comes, we intend to engage fully. In the meantime, we will use the BOSSR as a mechanism to keep regulators around the West and BOSSR members informed and educated about developments on the day-ahead market front. The next regular BOSSR meeting is scheduled for Friday, January 14th, 2022. It will be an open meeting, and the materials and connection information will be posted on the EIM BOSSR meeting webpage. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this update on BOSSR activities, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the governing body. Thank you.
Commissioner, that was an excellent report, and there is definitely a lot going on, and you guys should be very proud about the work that was done to get your funding together and be able to just really get that training and education that will help you guys help us. So any comments by any of the governing body members or questions? Rob?
No questions. Laura, I just want to say I appreciate your update, and it's terrific to see the great activity by BOSSR and the willingness to work through the issues and submit the comments and direction that effectively represents the perspective of the West. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no questions for Commissioner, we will move to the next item. Thank you, Commissioner. So next we have the Regional Issues Forum update by Pam Sporberg. She's the chair of the Regional Issues Forum, and she's also with Portland General Electric. Pam?
Thank you, Anita. I first want to take some time to reflect on RIF's very busy schedule from 2021. 2021 saw a lot of major changes for the RIF, particularly in response to the recommendations that came out of the Governance Review Committee's proposed revisions to the EIM Charter. Based on those revisions and those recommendations, we updated our operating guidelines, and then after that update, along with redefining the different sectors that were represented in the Regional Issues Forum, we elected almost a brand new slate of liaisons. Despite this very busy schedule, we continue to host virtual meetings where we welcomed all the new EIM entrants that Elliot mentioned, a very large and diverse group of new entrants. We heard about resource adequacy around the West from WEC, and we also discussed resource efficiency, another key topic of policy making this year. And then we also took a deep dive into the CAISO's load forecast. So a very, very busy year for the Regional Issues Forum. With our new group of liaisons that we introduced to you in the last call, we have since then selected a new leadership team for the Regional Issues Forum. First, Vijay Satayal from the Western Resource Advocates was elected as vice chair, and he will be ascending into the chair role shortly when we are ready to make that transition. Josh Walter from Seattle City Light is currently the co-vice chair to enable that transition to happen more smoothly. And then Ian White with Shell was elected as the secretary of the Regional Issues Forum. I am also very excited to announce that we will be hosting our first in-person meeting in almost 2 years. That meeting will take place in January 25th, 2022. And we will be hosting that in Portland so that we can hopefully see many of you guys in person and have that opportunity to have the active discussion and collaboration that those in-person meetings really provide and that we really miss. Our agenda is still under development and being finalized, but is likely to include a panel on greenhouse gas accounting, which is a key topic of discussion, especially as we undertake the EDAM initiative. We're also proposed to have an overview of what each CAISO market run is and what it does and the purpose it plays in the market. Again, another component that is, I think, foundational to an understanding of the EDAM. There are many, many market runs with a whole host of acronyms behind each one of those. And I think providing stakeholders with an understanding of what each market run does and why it takes place when it does will help with some of the foundational EIM concepts. And we will also be hosting WAPA as a new EIM entrant and welcoming them to the new entrant discussion. We hope that many of you will be able to join us either in person, not in a quorum, but enough to not have a quorum, as well as on the phone for this milestone meeting. And we are hopeful that in 2022, we will ultimately see a return to our standard adjacency between the RIF and the governing body meeting. I think we really miss that synergy that partnership provides. And I hope that we'll be able to get back to that point shortly. And with that, I will conclude my formal remarks and take any questions.
Any comments or questions for Pam? Val?
Wait, so Pam, you mentioned the officer changes. Now, I presume that means that you remain the chair?
I am going to remain in the chair role for probably another 3 or 4 months. I have been the longest serving chair of the Regional Issues Forum, mostly to ensure continuity during the Governance Review Committee process so that we would be able to effectuate that transition under consistent leadership. But as that process has concluded and we have new liaisons, I think it's a good opportunity to have a fresh voice in this role. And Vijay has kindly agreed to step into that position. We're working to make sure that that transition goes smoothly and to have Vijay included, as well as Josh included in many of our leadership activities, especially those leadership activities that partner with the governing body, so that that transition goes smoothly, because we do recognize that we have new liaisons, and even Vijay has only joined us within the last year. So we want to make sure that that happens as smoothly as possible and provide a really good partnership to make that happen.
Thank you for that update. I am very impressed that the RIF has really taken seriously sort of the succession planning concept within the RIF. So that's just really great to see.
Well, thank you, Val. I know both Anita and John were very instrumental in making some of these recommendations, so I appreciate the concern that the governing body has had to make sure that that continuity has been maintained and that the RIF has had that opportunity to continue to provide value as we make these transitions.
Any other comments? I would just say, particularly for this call and those on the call, Pam has just been a tireless advocate for the RIF, and she's really worked hard, both with individual governing body members, to just make sure that people are represented and brings issues forward. And people don't always see the stuff that she does, but I mean, she does have a day job, but she has definitely dedicated a lot of her time to the betterment of the RIF. And I think the governance changes and new liaison, I just see a lot of new energy, if you will, being breathed into the RIF, and in no small part due to a lot of Pam's efforts. So Pam, thank you.
Thank you, Anita. I really do appreciate that, those comments. It isn't, I don't know if I could say tireless. It is certainly a lot of work and has been a real opportunity to have this as an opportunity to lead this wonderful group of liaisons. And I have every confidence that Vijay, Josh, and Ian will continue that enthusiasm and bring fresh legs to this run as we address many new regional issues in the future.
All right. Thank you. If there are no other comments, I'm going to move to the next agenda item. So the resource sufficiency evaluation has been on the horizon for a long time, and there's been a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions. I want to give a shout out to the Cal ISO and staff, and particularly to Anna McKenna, who will be presenting to us today. She's the Vice President of Market Policy and Performance. So based on the comments that came back from the first draft, I really appreciate that the Cal ISOs took a step back, and I think in large part Anna's leadership helped do that, to take a step back rather than move things ahead when there was still a lot of controversy and not necessarily a lot of agreement about some of the elements of the first proposal. So Anna's been working with her team and with stakeholders to present another final draft. And again, I just want to support that sometimes taking the time sometimes is much better than moving ahead and having a lot of dissatisfaction. So Anna, great kudos to you and your team for that, and to stakeholders who stayed engaged and continued in this dialogue on the resource sufficiency. So with that, if you can give us an update of where we are.
Thank you, Chair Decker, for your very kind words. I really greatly appreciate them. And on behalf of my team as well, I'd like to express my thanks. And as you know, these things are not conducted in a vacuum. Myself could never have achieved the great success. I want to thank all of my staff members, in particular, Danny Johnson and Brittany Dean, who worked hard on this initiative, as well as Greg Cook. But I also want to take a few minutes to thank our stakeholders and our partners throughout the region for really helping us dig through some of these issues a little bit more deeply and taking, invested time to really work with us on coming up with some solutions. So with that, I am pleased to be presenting a little bit of an update here for you all today as to where we're at. Earlier this year, as you noted, we set off to examine the design and implementation of the EIM resource efficiency test, and our goal at that point was to really determine whether there were any enhancements needed to ensure that the test was and the components of the test, actually achieved their stated goal. And it just as a little bit of a refresher, in terms of how we look at these tests, the purpose of the resource efficiency evaluation, which consists of a series of tests, is really to ensure that all EIM entities are able to meet their demand obligations with their own supply prior to engaging in transfers with other balancing authority areas, so that all EIM entities can mutually benefit from the economic diversity available in participating in the EIM. So that's sort of the goal we continue to look for in terms of the changes that we make. After, some time, we started this initiative earlier this year, we felt that we had achieved some degree of consensus and a good proposal around October. But as you noted, after we posted our draft final proposal, we continued to receive some concerns from the various parties. And I would say that the concerns that we received, which is what I'm going to highlight for today, really fall in sort of four categories. What we did, of course, as you noted, is in response to that, we were able to put a little bit of a pause to our process so that we could actually also dig into some data analysis that the members and the EIM entities had requested, as well as our MSC. And through that analysis, we were able to actually better understand how certain actions taken by our operators, for example, impact EIM transfers, which I think overall with the additional analysis has helped us come to a better place, if you wish, with the overall proposal. So where are we on these four areas of concerns that we, took some time to consider? The first category of concern was related to the measurement of uncertainty in the capacity test. And because of the concerns with the methods currently used to capture that uncertainty, we are now considering suspending any inclusion of the uncertainty in the capacity and test until we can enhance those methods of capturing the uncertainty. The second area of concerns were related to the demand response resources that cannot be modeled in the market and how those resources might be used to meet the test. Again, we had received concerns regarding, we had proposed previously in the draft final proposal to enhance penalties associated with the use of such resources, but we got a lot of feedback that such penalties could detrimentally impact their ability to actually use the demand response resources. And so now we are considering not enhancing any of the current rules related to demand response and leaving things as they are. But we will continue to monitor for potential misuse or, overly erroneous practices. So we'll keep a close eye on that. The third category of concerns were related to basically how resources are counted towards meeting the tests. And that's basically which resources you count based on the availability. I would sort of capture them in that category. After further consideration and looking into some of the issues and concerns, we actually are now thinking of modifying the criteria so that we can ensure that the resources that are counted, we can better reflect the actual availability within the time that the test is conducted. So we're going to make some changes there as well. The fourth and final category that I'll touch on today is related to actions taken by operators to conform load forecast in the real-time market, and the concern is how those actions might impact or might affect EIM transfers and how those EIM transfers might be relied on to pass the test. So this is an area that's a little bit complex, and while the complexity comes in from the times at which the tests are conducted, but we did take some additional time to consider the concerns that were raised by our stakeholders. And with the additional analysis, we were able to provide some additional information and better understand how exactly the load conformance might impact the EIM transfers and the ability to use those transfers to meet the test. One of the things we learned, of course, and we shared with stakeholders, that it's really important to understand that there isn't a one-to-one relationship really between the load conformance and the actions taken by our operators and the EIM transfers, and then how those transfers are used to meet the test. And we know that load conformance happens, throughout at different times and at different intervals of the real-time market. And so we could see that in many instances, such as when we bias the load for purposes of increasing intertie resources or internal resources being dispatched in the hour-ahead process, that had no effect, if you wish, on the EIM transfers or ability to use EIM transfers to meet the test. We also learned that for and conformance that's done within the hour, in some cases, the conformance was actually triggering an ability for the ISO to retain ramping capability that was available during that hour. So again, that was not impacting the EIM transfers per se. But we also learned through this additional analysis that it is also certainly possible that some of the conformance does in fact trigger EIM transfers, and those can impact the ability to pass the test. So, in summary, this is a little bit more complex and requires additional analysis to really come up with a method that fairly and equitably captures the granularity of the impacts load conformance might have. And so because of this, we're proposing to take some additional time next year to both analyze and consider potential changes on how load conformance might impact the ability to use EIM transfers to pass the test. We'll start with some stakeholder workshops. We hope to do some additional analysis. Stakeholders have asked for that, and we'll be looking into doing some additional analysis to better understand the correlation between the load conformance and the transfers. And then we'll proceed with continued stakeholder initiative, sort of like the second phase of this initiative, to consider policy changes. Well, in conclusion, I just wanted to say that, we hope that after we post, which is probably happening in the next few hours here, our next proposal, we look forward to receiving comments from all stakeholders. We'll take a look at those comments and then finalize the proposal and hopefully be able to come to you in February with a final proposal that will have addressed many of the issues that have been considered in the stakeholder initiative. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Jennifer?
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate the update on this important stakeholder initiative. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the uncertainty requirement. And obviously we heard a lot from stakeholders on concerns that this was causing them to fail the resource efficiency test more frequently than they had before. And so very pleased to hear that you will be turning this off or proposing to turn off this requirement until some of these changes can be addressed. One thing that I wanted to hear a little bit more about is how and whether the ISO will be addressing the proposed quantile regression methodology and whether that will be addressed in phase 2 of this initiative.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So the quantile regression approach, which is a name given to a methodology we've been considering to capture uncertainty used both in the test for the resource efficiency test, but also in our flexible ramping product that is used in the real-time market to procure ramping capability. That quantile regression methodology has been in design, and we're looking to implement that at the end of 2022. We have considered, and there has been some requests that we consider putting that in sooner, but based on implementation, we think that the best time for us to be able to implement that reliably would be the end of 2022. When that goes into play with flexible ramping product, that would be could be contemporaneously also, used for purposes of the test. There have been some requests in the latest round of stakeholder outreach we've been doing to consider whether that quantile regression itself is the most appropriate way to do so. So what we're considering is, and I'm not trying to parse words, but it's more what we're looking at is making sure we have the right measurement for the uncertainty in the test itself. And quantile regression may be fine for flexible ramping product. We're going to make sure we understand and consider that it's also appropriate for purposes of the test.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Now, I just want to say I really appreciate the update. This was just an update. We don't want to put Anna on the spot for things that stakeholders and they are still working on as a team. Update questions, great. I do want to see if there's any comments by the public, recognizing that our meeting is not a stakeholder process. But if there's any comments or questions by the public that would be appropriate for this update, that'd be great. Any other comments by the governing body? Rob?
Anna, thank you for this update. I think this was very informative and very helpful. I'll start off with saying that when the uncertainty was being added earlier this year, I thought it made a lot of sense and was supportive of it. So I have to admit, when I look at it now, that going back on that and suspending it until it can really be well understood was a bit of a surprise. But I think certainly your comments are absolutely in the right direction. I guess overall summary is that this is really complex, and you've clearly laid out how much is involved in coming up with this. And I would just hope that the end product is as simple as possible, so that when there's choice to be made, more simple versus more complex, and easily understood. And then lastly, something that is visible immediately, so that when somebody is not meeting resource efficiency, they know it and they know why they're not meeting it. Thank you.
Thank you. For those comments, Member Kanzioka, Vice Chair Kanzioka. Yes, I think those are very good principles for us to follow in this, and I will definitely be taking that back to my team as we consider the next set of changes.
Any other comments or questions by the governing body? And I am going to pause a minute, not to put Anna on the spot, but if there's public comment that's not necessarily tied to the stakeholder process, that'd be this is the time to do that.
Okay, and just as a reminder, you can place yourself in the comment queue by utilizing the raise hand feature located at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a mobile device, tap your screen to display the toolbar and then press raise hand. You'll be unmuted when it is your turn. Please accept the unmute message to become unmuted. If you're on phone, please press #2 to enter the queue.
And while we're waiting a minute for anybody that might press #2 or raise their hand, I don't know if folks are familiar with William Occam. So he did the theory about problem solving. It's called Occams Razor, and it's the simplest solution is usually the best. So I want to echo Rob's comments there. So Marv, I'm going to go back to you.
Looks like we currently have no comments.
Okay. Anna, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate the willingness to pause, revisit with stakeholders and work through this issue. I'm anxious to see the comments that come through on this next draft. So great work by you and your team. Please convey that, and stakeholders, great work to all of you who have really stayed with this issue and continued to refine it.
Thank you very much. And you all have, I'll just say happy holidays to everyone.
And same to you. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next item, item number 8, and it is the EIM Benefits update, and that will be done by Guillermo Bastilla already, and he's the Director of Market Analysis and Forecasting, and I hope I did not butcher your name there. Oh, wait, I missed the DMM. I'm sorry. I missed Eric. So, Eric, I apologize for that. So, Eric, Department of Market Monitoring. You're on. If you unmute. Eric, you're muted.
Okay. Yep. Okay, well, can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yep, thank you. Eric Hildebrand with the Director of Market Monitoring. And we are here to report out to you on kind of the special and more expanded reporting on the resource efficiency test that we started doing in September in response to requests from stakeholders and the governing body and the ISO. So next slide, please. So just to, review, we started this, I think it was in September. We got our first report out. So it was after the summer. We went back to July and August. As you may know, there were some significant design changes that took place in June. Excuse me. So we started reporting through the summer months, which are most important, and it focused in on the period after the changes were made, including the uncertainty component. So the reports highlight the impact of that. We had 2 stakeholder calls to discuss the reports and the data in the reports, make sure participants understood that, and also to get feedback on additional metrics or detail that would be helpful. We had 1 call, then we had a second call in response to popular requests for another call. So those have been very productive. I think in some cases stakeholder issues came up, but we really deferred those to the stakeholder process. So I think it's worked well with participants when we do talk about reports and really stick to what's in the data, what's in the report, what other analysis might be done, and we channel the discussions about design options into the stakeholder process. One thing we did, I'm very proud of, we were able to start posting interval level data on November 8th. We waited until an additional round of the stakeholder process in which the ISO was asking for comments on or any objections to posting additional data. So once we got the go-ahead from the ISO, I think within a day or 2 we had posted and have continued to post all the detailed 15-minute data that pretty much any piece of data you see in any of the charts or monthly metrics that we publish, the interval level data is now available to participants, and we're doing that right now just on our own on the DMM website in Excel files, but that seems to be working pretty well. It's all at a balancing area level, so every balancing area can get their own data and see the data of other balancing areas as well. Then if you kind of look back at the reports, our first report, we kind of had a suite of metrics that we had already developed. We got that out, and then in the subsequent reports, we've supplemented that with additional analysis and data that had, been identified as being very useful or of interest in the stakeholder process, and that includes the uncertainty component. And so I'll show you even the different components that go into that, how that's calculated or what's driving that. Imbalance conformance is another one. We have routinely reported on that for years, but more in terms of averages, monthly averages, and mins and maxes. So we now provide more detail on that, including the actual data is now available to all the balancing areas. We did some analysis of the available upward capacity in each area. I'll provide you an example of that. We looked at, in a more recent report, comparing the amount of imports occurring through the EIM to the amount of unloaded capacity within different balancing areas, particularly the California ISO. That's, I think was the primary area of concern in the stakeholder process. And then we have some additional metrics and data about the transfers and the transfer limits in different balancing areas following failures. Next slide, please. Next slide, Christina.
Sorry, Eric, my screen is frozen. Hold on one second. Oh, got it. Okay.
Okay, so the rest of the presentation, I went into some of the recent reports and grabbed just sample charts just to give you a flavor of what we are publishing, and just some highlights of what it shows. This is one of the basic charts that we have published from the beginning, and it's really just how often different areas fail the upward capacity test each month. And you can see there that the test failures have indeed increased in summer 2021. And we did analysis show that the increase is primarily due to corrections and changes in the test, particularly the uncertainty component that was added beginning in June. So the old failures have gone up, but they keep in mind here they still represent a pretty small percentage of total intervals or hours. So you can see there in the California ISO the number of intervals, it really is, averaging more like 1 hour per month. So 4 15-minute intervals that was failing this summer. Next slide, please. And then another kind of trend, or the second set of metrics we have is, when an area does fail the test, what's the magnitude of that? Is it just barely failing the test? What's the magnitude in terms of total megawatts or a percent of their total load? So we provide metrics on that. And I guess as I mentioned I meant to mention on the other slide, these metrics are good. They highlight, individual balancing areas can see them if they're not already aware of kind of their own pattern of failures. It provides kind of a benchmark for the rest of the market. And, we also look at, I know areas use this to kind of identify factors that might be driving failures so they can take action to reduce those. And I know that the results have been used for that by some balancing areas. Next slide, please. This one just shows the other main test is the upward ramping test. And again, so the failures of that you can see here are quite a bit lower than the capacity test. Those, however, these do tend to be focused in the net peak ramping hours, which are, usually the most important hours. But again, this is an example of, instead of just having this chart each area can now go in and see, which specific intervals all those failures occurred and what the system conditions were during those intervals where either their balancing area or another area failed the test. Next slide, please. This next chart is one we began posting this perhaps even prior to September, and it really shows the reason why different balancing areas fail the test or have their transfers limited. And, just to briefly recap, there's the two different tests, and if they fail one or both of tests, then the transfer limits are frozen. So it's important, I think, to understand, is an area failing both tests, or is it really just one test that's triggering the transfer limit that kicks in? So this is a kind of a diagnostic we found helpful. And so in addition, it takes the frequency, how often an area failed, and then kind of what's driving that. Is it the capacity test, the sufficiency test, or both? Next slide, please. This slide shows, so it breaks down the uncertainty component, which has been, had a big impact and been somewhat controversial. So this shows what's driving that. We've published this type of monthly average chart for all balancing areas, and it's quite different for different areas. And in addition, again, they would be receiving interval level data on all this, which can be really important to understand if they did fail, why the uncertainty component may have changed dramatically before or after when they were failing a test. So you can see here the different drivers for the California ISO. The big one is the solar uncertainty and wind uncertainty, and this varies quite a bit in different balancing areas. So it's, I think, provided quite a bit of transparency for all the areas. Next slide, please. This next slide shows an example. Well, this is actually how we were reporting on the imbalanced conformance for a number of years. Actually, we've been reporting the extent to which the ISO primarily uses this to increase imports and increase unloaded capacity during the evening ramping hours. So we've generally reported it this way in kind of averages, and in the ISO system it is much more predictable, thematic. So the average chart is, representative for a balancing area like the ISO, but other balancing areas, there isn't nearly as a consistent trend. So if we could go to the next slide, please. You can see here, this was something stakeholders requested was, do a comparison of the different balancing areas, and not in terms of total megawatts, but in terms of percentage of their load. So you can see there, indeed, the imbalanced conformance is used pretty sparingly in other balancing areas, both in terms of the megawatts as well as a percentage of each area's load. And again, all this data is now available to all the different participants. Next slide, please. This next slide summarizes some analysis we did in the stakeholder process as the ISO considered the issue of, to what extent should capacity that may be constrained by different operating constraints and not actually available, to what extent that should be factored into the test, and perhaps limit what generation is counted to generation that could be dispatched, within the hour or in a reasonable time period. So we did some analysis, kind of a bookends, just to show the magnitude that a rule change like that could have. And we used the California ISO as an example. So the light, actually the dark green on the top here represents internal generation that was counted for the test, but depending on how the rule might be modified to limit what's counted, it could significantly decrease the amount of capacity being counted. Next slide, please. And I guess here you can see it, why it's all green. That is, let's see, I guess it doesn't say the fuel type. We've also done this by fuel type and in the ISO mainly driven by gas. So these lines then show the impact that adding the uncertainty component to the requirement had. So the dotted line would be the requirement without the uncertainty component, and the red line is the requirement as it was this summer with the additional uncertainty component. And you can then compare that, so compare the red line to the bars or the available capacity. You can see there where I think this was, if there's not a date, I believe this is June 19th when the ISO failed the test for some hours or some intervals in hour 20. Next animation, please. Okay. Yeah, there you go. So this shows how, I guess in the end of hour 19, you can see there that the red line did go above the available capacity, and clearly that the effect of the uncertainty component had a big impact there and increased the number of intervals that the ISO failed the test. Next bubbles, please. And so that's an example of how the analysis can be used to assess the impact of the uncertainty component. And then the blue bubbles there show that depending on how much capacity was excluded from the test under a potential design change, what impact that might have. And you can see here if all of the dark green capacity was in fact excluded from the test, that the ISO would have failed quite a few more intervals on, I believe this was June 19th, or the sample day that we were using here. So again, just to summarize, that's how we have been trying to get some of this data out and do some additional analysis to help feed into the stakeholder process and help stakeholders and the ISO assess the potential magnitude of the changes being discussed. I guess as Anna mentioned, the uncertainty component, if that is, you can see here, if that is suspended, then of course all the data that's provided, could be used to kind of go back and see the impact of suspending the uncertainty component would have. Next slide, please. I think this is my final slide. So July 9th, that was the day that we have used in reports. We've taken kind of critical days each month when those occur, especially if a test failure occurs, and we've kind of drilled down and provided detailed examples in some of the reports. This just shows, this slide illustrates how indeed when the ISO area did fail the test, that how the transfers were limited. That's shown by the red bar, and that helps illustrate the impact of failing the test had. So while it limited imports during some intervals, the ISO did continue to import, I think it was up to about 1,500 megawatts through the EIM. Next slide, please. Okay, and then that's it for me. So I'm glad to answer any questions or entertain any comments.
Thank you, Eric. Nice job. I really do appreciate seeing how much you guys have dug into this issue. John, I see you have a question?
Yeah, again, Eric, thanks for this. This is great information, great report. I guess my takeaway from this presentation and reading the reports themselves indicates some sort of a correlation with what we heard from Anna McKenna on the 4 different points of the RS, the problems with the RS test right now. But do you agree with that? And specifically for her item, she talked about, I think it was her 4th item, which was the load forecast conformance that the ISO uses. This data, to me, really does correlate and collaborate or corroborate the fact that that is happening. Do you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the conformance has indeed been, happening for a number of years, and we've really highlighted that in our reports that, and we've highlighted in that, to us, it indicates that the flexible ramping product hasn't been, I think, successful in dealing with, the ramping issue the way it was intended in the California ISO, and the operators were instead utilizing manual dispatches, exceptional dispatches before the ramping period, and then the load bias during the ramping period. So we've been reporting on that, and so yeah, we agree those are, that's been happening for a long time. I guess when it comes to whether or not, we don't think it's as simple as just adding the load bias into the test, because the ISO is, to us, the ISOs are using those tools kind of as the equivalent of procuring bilaterally additional imports kind of prior or during the hourhead market, which the ISO can't do. It doesn't have any other mechanism to do any additional procurement after the day-ahead market. So we think it is something that merits, it's not straightforward, and it merits taking the extra time to think about the extent to which or how you might modify the test to take that into consideration.
But then, I guess...
But we're all, the data are out there. How much, I guess a point I would make, and I think the ISO's made that, is it's not a one, it's not as simple as, if the load bias goes up and then that, additional capacity that is automatically imported into the ISO, so that there's additional analysis that would need to be done to show the impact of that. I believe the ISO actually did some of that for some sample days. They did in the most recent stakeholder meeting, have really drilled down and done a more detailed analysis illustrating the impact of the load bias based on more detailed analysis. I believe even rerunning some of the software in some cases.
Okay, well,
we agree. Okay.
I just look forward to that additional analysis so we can find out, the true impact and was there any leaning because of this.
Yeah. Our concern is we wouldn't want something with, ideally, I think in the ISO market is, the ISO's been trying to develop a market product to procure the ramp that it would want. And while that hasn't been as successful, we would not want to see something where the ISO reverted back to manual procurement prior to the hourhead market. So basically more manual procurement on the intertie and then exceptional dispatches within the ISO. So we would like to see something that would keep moving more toward a market solution rather than going back to a more manual approach, which I think is more used in other balancing areas. It is still more of a bilateral procurement framework in the other balancing areas, whereas the ISO, the gold ISO, is to do everything through the market.
Okay, well, I look forward to this being at least resolved as quickly as possible to see what problems are really out there. Okay. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? I want to stay on Eric for a minute. So, any other questions or comments for Eric? So I do want to say, Eric, great reporting. I think this just really keep peeling the onion back, and I think stakeholders really appreciate that. I think it's the peeling the onion back that's really going to be important as the CalISO and stakeholders look at how, where do we take these things? Because this is one of those issues that when you pull one thread, you end up with consequences that may not be readily apparent. And so this is a corny statement, but this is a take as a village to figure out. And we really, I think good progress is being made, and I think the reporting has only added to the good progress being made with the CalISO staff, as well as the DMM, helping everyone understand what's kind of going on to the degree that we can at this point, realizing that there is still more to uncover, as Anna talked about. So, Eric, really well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if I can move on to the next item, and again, Guillermo, I am so sorry that I introduced you wrongly. Guillermo's having some technical difficulties, so he's going to be on audio only, but we do have his slides. So, Guillermo, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Becker. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Chair Becker and members of the EIM governing body. Thank you for having me. This briefing covers the EIM benefits for quarter 3 of 2021. Next slide, please. Quarter 3 saw a record high EIM benefits in the amount of $301 million. These benefits largely accrue on July and September. There are several factors at play for this level of benefits. First, we have 5 additional entities joining the EIM since quarter 2 2021. More entities enable more transfers, not just for the new entities, but also for the existing entities. Second, Q3 is the time of the year when we experience high loads, higher prices across the West. Higher prices mean transfers and economic displacement of energy will be valued more. The condition that was more pronounced in this quarter is indeed the economic displacement of highly valued energy. For instance, we saw that hydro was scarce and reflected as highly valued energy across the EIM. The EIM benefits simply reflect the economic displacement of these highly valued energy resources by cheaper transfers that are coming from other areas. For instance, if an area has a supply that reflects a value of, let's say, $500 per megawatt hour, and that becomes displaced economically by a transfer of, let's say, $100, the benefits will reflect a cost savings of $400. And that is really what happened in quarter 3 of 2021. Next slide, please. With the $301 million of benefits in quarter 3 2021, the cumulative benefits of the EIM since its inception is so far at $1.7 billion. This level of gross economical benefits is a good testament of the value and the effectiveness of the EIM to meet supply and demand at the least cost across the West. And as you can see, these benefits have been increasing over time. Next slide, please. Another benefit of the EIM is the avoided energy curtailments. If not for energy transfers facilitated by the EIM, some renewable generation would be curtailed. The portion in green reflects the curtailments in the CAISO system, while the blue section represents the avoided curtailments due to the EIM. The red line reflects the cumulative of avoided curtailments. As we can see, avoided curtailments continue to accrue over time, and obviously there is a seasonal trend, and we have more curtailments in the springtime when we have plenty of supply and, relatively speaking, low levels of demand. Next slide, please. A significant contributor to the EIM benefits is transfers across balancing areas. Transfers enable access to lower cost supply. It can also be possible that a transfer is realized between two areas that are not directly connected by means of wheeling through with a third area. We have been tracking this implicit wheeling through among different EIM areas, and in Q3, the volume of wheels for each area was smaller than the overall volume of imports and exports together. This means the benefits of an EIM area are largely realized by its own transfers, while it still enables transfers among other areas by the wheels through. Next slide, please. Although transfers can be quite dynamic, they tend to have certain patterns. This plot illustrates the hourly profile for each month of the quarter across the different areas. A positive value represents a transfer coming into the given area. Typically, the CAISO area tends to export significant volumes of energy during the midday hours, which then switch to become an import for peak hours. Other areas will be the counterparties taking on these transfers. In quarter 3, we saw a change in pattern where CAISO area had a consistent trend of transfer imports, even in midday hours. As we move from the July timeframe towards the August timeframe, we can see the CAISO transfers return to the more typical historical pattern of exporting in midday hours. This is simply reflecting the economic value of the supply across the system. Next slide, please. Overall, prices exceeded the $40 per megawatt hour reference that we saw in quarter 2 2021. In some areas, we actually see prices reaching on average prices in the range of $60 to $70 per megawatt hour. This is expected since this is the season with the highest loads of the year and supply naturally becomes more limited. The external bilateral prices for mid-season, Palo Verde, and COP are shown also as a reference. These are the external prices, and you can see they also reflect correspondingly high prices. There is also another variable impacting prices in the summer, in Q3, and that was the gas dynamics. Gas prices were quite high and volatile. In September, for instance, certain hubs experienced gas prices over $100 per MMBTU. As a reference, typical prices for hubs are in the range of $3 to $6 per MMBTU. That just gives you a sense of how volatile these prices were. And obviously, they will be reflected to some degree in the electric prices, given the fact that we have a generation fleet based on gas. Next slide, please. There are different ways to look at prices. Averages don't expose all the dynamics. Another way to look at prices is by the hourly profile. In this case, that profile is also per month. Average hourly prices show a trend of spiking up to $160 during the peak time. That is when the supply is tight. This trend naturally evolves over time, reflecting simply the supply and demand conditions. As we enter now into the winter season, we start to see prices to decline and to some extent follow the shape of the load that we have in the system. That's all what I have for this briefing. Thank you for your time. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Guillermo. So any questions by the governing body? Okay, great report. It's always really kind of edifying to just see how well things are going and knowing that I think that we will continue on that trend. And so it's a good news message for consumers across the West that are participating in the EIM. Okay, next item we have on the agenda is the EIM implementation update from Khaled Abdul-Rahman, and he is the Vice President of Power Systems and Marketing Technology. So Khaled, I think you might be on mute.
And Khaled, please check your device. It looks like your line is currently unmuted in Zoom.
So it looks like you've got a hand raised, so maybe that's keeping it from coming through.
Since we have a moment, if you don't mind, Chair Decker, I just wanted to say that I really like slide 2. In the olden days, we didn't have this great pictorial to show. We should have just showed a map, and then next to the map, which was color-coded, we see a listing of who's coming online or who's already online in the EIM. But I really like this wheel of time, so to speak, which actually shows even year by year who came on and who will be coming on in the future. I just like this representation.
All right, good. Okay, Colette, hopefully we can hear you now. No.
And I've just passed Khaled some additional instructions. Khaled, if you could disconnect and use those instructions I've just pasted there in the chat for you.
We're working on the technical situation with Khaled. I want to go to item number 10, which is the update on the EIM governing body expert. So we'll give Khaled a moment there. So just by way of a short update, we are continuing to progress the hiring of the governing body market expert. So many of you may have saw the governing body market expert posting on the Cal ISO daily briefing. It's been up there several times now. I want to encourage our stakeholders to forward that notice to any person or firm that may be a potential applicant, and for them to submit their interests. Of note, there is a conflict of interest requirement that the applicant must be aware of, so that's an important thing for them to take a look at. And the closing date for interested parties is January 28th. So we extended it out past the holidays to give people a reasonable time to respond to the call for interest. This is an important position. We did not want to rush it, and we wanted people to have the amount of time that they would need to put together a thoughtful application. So just a heads up that that's out there. Okay, so that was item 10. We're going to move back to item 9. So Colette, do we have you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Oh, thanks, God. All right. Sorry for that. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the EIM governing body. I want to give you a quick, sorry for the technical difficulty. If we move to the next slide, please. And yes, I also like this slide. It just gives a little bit, more kind of the time and time wheel. That's a good, title for that. It gives you since the start of the EIM, and the different entities that are online. So we have 14 entities as of now. And on the left side in the middle, where I say we are here, that is basically the current timeline, December. We are online for the 4 or 5 entities that we had this year, as well as we are right now in doing, onboarding of those entities that are right above the arrow line. And this will also give you, what is coming in the 2023. Of course, we're still on hold for the Excel Energy. We're still, hoping that we will hear something in the future, but we continue to be on hold for that implementation. But the rest of the implementation, El Paso, Western, and Wapa, Desert Southwest, and Evangel, they are all, you can see them here. The idea here is that we are currently about, based on the committed EIM entities, we are 84%, comprising 84% of the WECC load, megawatt hour. And in comparison, if you want to compare that to what the SPP market has, it's 3%. The other 13%, there's Alberta, comprise 10% of the WECC. So, and then there is about other smaller loads that are comprise the rest. So between this 84% is based or referenced to the WECC total load, which includes Alberta and BC Hydro. Next slide, please. Okay, so, as I said, currently we are onboarding the new EIM entities that will join us for the 2022 Go Live. We have actually started this year our parallel operation on December 1st. for the 3 EIM entities, Avista, Bonneville, PA, as well as Tacoma, because the go-live date is going to be earlier in March 2nd. So we started 1 month early, or actually 2 months earlier than normal, and to be able to meet that March go-live date. We also have another EIM entity, Tucson Electric, which is moving based on the normal timeline for the EIM onboarding. So the Tucson just entered into the market simulation on December 1st. So this time our team is kind of divided between supporting the parallel operation as well as at the same time supporting market simulation for Tucson Electric. And so far we are able to meet the requests and be monitoring both systems and kind of delivering the services that we are supposed to. So for this year, again, we have 2 go-lives. One is on March 2nd with the 3 EIM entities at the top, and another one in April timeframe for Tucson. We are also onboarding the 3 EIM entities, Evangrid, El Paso Electric, and Desert Southwest, Desert Southwest. These entities are also, in terms of the schedule, they are moving very good. We are currently, they are registering and supplying and submitting the forms for registering scheduling coordinators and the initial network data submissions and the physical meter assessment, as well as we see that all of them are registering in the trainer workshop that usually comes at this time. So summary, everything seems to be moving along, and EIM seems to continue to thrive and bring us more and more entities for the next year and the 2023 as well. Thank you. I will stop here if there's any questions.
Any questions or comments by the governing body? Okay, great report. Love slide 2. I sent a note to see if we can get a copy of slide 2 to each of the governing body members, because it's really, really nicely done. It really does tell the story. With that, in your board book, you have the information reports in terms of our policy calendar and the stakeholder initiatives. Let's see. And I think, unless any comments before we adjourn for questions. Okay, as we get ready to adjourn, tomorrow marks the first official joint session with the governing body and the Board of Governors, and we hope that our stakeholders who have been on the call today, that they will join us for that session. It starts at noon, and we will have a piece of that agenda is the Governance Review Committee, a report from Therese Hampton, and also I think we may hear again some on the resource sufficiency from Anna McKenna. So just a good meeting. It'll short meeting tomorrow, but good meeting, and I hope that you will join us. With that, the meeting is adjourned.
Great. Thank you, Chair Decker. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.